Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Politics Relaxed podcast. We're joined by Manjit Gill MBE, who is running for Tory councillor and is also the head of an amazing charity, Binti, which works on period poverty. This is our second episode focusing on the local elections coming up this May. First of all, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for making the time. This is really quite exciting.
All right. Who wants to start with the first question? Cameron?
Yeah, I'll start. So firstly, quite a broad-ranging question. Why do you want to run for local councillor, and why should the people of Weybridge elect you?
It's a great question, actually. And I think if I reflect back on my life, I should have been a politician a long time ago. I've always kind of stood up for people, gone out of my way to put things right and stand for the underdog. And I think over the last 7 years, and sounds a bit strange and crazy, but as I've been running my charity, I have probably visited Parliament more in that 7-year period than I have in my entire life. And it kind of makes sense now as I've gained so much experience and success in campaigning and the activism and the work that we do. It felt like it's a natural progression into getting into politics locally. I've made huge changes around the topic globally, and it feels like this is something that I can do locally and stand up for the community that I work with.
Yeah, and what you mentioned
there. Sorry, and why should they vote for me? They should vote for me because I would say the role that seems to fit the most is that I'd be a conduit between what policy needs to be changed and communicating what's happening at grassroots level. So this is kind of what I believe the role will entail and how I can make the biggest impact. And I'm one of those crazy people that once I get an idea in my head, I won't stop until I finish it or get a solution for it.
And what you started off by mentioning there, I think a key value to when you're going into careers in politics, really, I think fundamentally, politics has got to be about helping people. So I think it's good to see people running for positions that really do actually believe in that. So I want to ask you next, just a quick follow up on that. Is local government the ultimate goal for you, or do you think it's a stepping stone to enter politics on a more national stage in the future?
It's definitely a stepping stone. I actually started my journey, I would say nearly 3 years ago, and started doing some training for an MP role. And I think I started that because I was getting success in what I was doing. But essentially, I didn't really know much about how the political system was set up. I didn't know anything about branches and just the whole party. And I actually was quite shocked and horrified to find out that it's all volunteer-based. You know, I always imagined the big machines to be employed, but essentially we're all volunteers. So that was also a good experience in terms of understanding also how you inspire people to actually help you on your campaign and get things done. So yeah, that's another reason.
Thank you for your detailed response, and I'd honestly be excited to see where you are in the future, and I think that's going to be something really, really exciting. According to UK girls' rights charity Plan International UK, 1 in 10 girls have been unable to afford sanitary wear. Your incredible charity Binti has been instrumental in tackling period poverty in the UK and across other regions such as India. As you progress in your political career, how are Binti planning to influence the government directly to further introduce legislation aiming to eradicate period poverty in the UK?
It's an interesting one in the sense that it seems like a very crazy situation that we're in, right? 1 in 10 girls cannot afford period products in the UK. I started this charity 7 years ago when I found out that some women in India and Africa didn't have access. And to have started the conversation from that perspective, but brought it to a local level now. And actually the latest stat was that 1 in 3 girls during the pandemic could not afford or get access to period products. So once upon a time, somebody decided that toilet paper would be available in all bathrooms and toilets and public spaces. I've got no idea who that was, and I've gone through my research to try and find that. And most women in the UK will admit that they use toilet paper when they're in between buying the next period products when they start, because periods are very unpredictable and we can start at any given time. So the policy change that I want to create is that the government ask all businesses to put free period products in their toilets, just as they do toilet paper and soap. And that will mean that we no longer have this so-called period poverty in our country, which is quite shocking.
Yeah, thank you again for your great answer. In Scotland, they have abolished the tampon tax now, and yet the Conservative Party have been in power for 10 years and only brought in one piece of legislation to combat period poverty, that being offering sanitary products for girls in schools. Have the Tories done enough, and are you disappointed in your colleagues for not doing more?
That's another great question. And I think, Felix, some of the conversations around periods have never been had before. They've only just started going into the mainstream. And that's kind of the most shocking aspect, because we just assume that this problem with periods and and lack of access is something that happens in the developing world. So I would say that in the last, obviously I started 7 years ago, and there's been a global phenomena. When I started, the only thing you would find is a few statistics and actually the incorrect definition of menstruation and period in the Oxford Dictionary. And I won't tell you what it says. I think you guys should look it up. But of course, since then, there's been an explosion of organizations that have come to the fore and are doing different things. It's a little bit like the fact that despite the fact that we all went to school in the UK, most of us can't actually explain what a period is. So it's not just the provision of period products, it's also creating a 360 program of menstruation for girls and boys so that they can understand each other's bodies. And on top of that, eradicating the stigma and the shame. So we were part of the government's period task force, which was set up in 2019. So the government are beginning to listen to what it is that we're trying to create. And we've got some wonderful news coming at the end of this month, which we'll share with you.
Thank you for your amazing work in period poverty and what you do. It's like changing many people's lives, and I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, you would have heard about the global shockwaves that were sent around the world. Sarah Everard's brutal murder that was condemned by the world. With the young woman Sarah Everard's murder that sent global shockwaves, what do you think can be done as a champion for women's rights and protection of women to ensure that women feel safe regardless of time, day, and location?
It's one of those things that I can relate to very much. I mean, if you listen to the stories around her death, they kind of come up with this idea that, well, us women don't feel safe. If you guys want to go for a walk, you just go for a walk. If we're going to go for a walk, we have to consider the time of the day, what we're wearing, what we've got in our hand. It is true, we do carry keys in our hands as a form of self-defense, just in case something happens, or we'll pretend that we're on the telephone when we're walking on our own and we feel a little bit unsafe. And it's crazy that this exists, but the truth is this has been the way for a very, very long time. And I'm a firm believer in that this isn't just about women doing something different themselves. This is about educating the men as well. So we have to work together, both genders, to find a solution that works for all of us. So it's communication and it's education.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an approach, a kind of collaborative approach that most people in society really do seem to want to take up. And I think that's important for us to be able to move on, and for men and women to be able to take responsibility and help to make that change that we need to make sure that women feel safer on the streets. I want to move on and talk a little bit now about local issues. Obviously, you're running to be a local councillor, so I want to talk a little bit about that as well. One of your key policies is to provide support to local businesses and to champion initiatives with them to create a vibrant high street once again. Can I ask how you're going to implement this? And I know that Weybridge and surrounding areas are areas where we've seen our high street start to look a little bit depleted. If you look at the Heart, for example, in Walton, we're starting to see many big businesses leaving from there. Do you think that this is a really serious problem and that we should be doing more? And do you think that you if you're elected, will work with a council that will wants to help to improve that, and how you'll do that?
I would say that actually, so I'm not sure if you guys know, but I was planning, I had put my name forward for this councillor role. Well, not last year, I can't even remember what year we're in, but the election last year, which of course was cancelled. So before COVID hit, our high streets were already beginning to diminish, with less of us shopping locally and more of us shopping online with the likes of Amazon. So this idea of, well, how do we change that? The only way we can really change that is by going back to basic shopping and shopping locally. And if we shop locally, then we're helping our local businesses, but also to kind of explore and look at different solutions. So I'm very much a solution-based person. Give me a problem and I won't stop until I find the solution. I don't work the other way around, where you give me a problem and I'm like, okay, what's this problem, and make the problem bigger than it is. Let's look at new ideas. Let's talk to the younger generation and see what it is that they want and what they think is required on the high street. Maybe there's a way of putting together pop-up retail or pop-up businesses or startups. It's kind of looking and exploring at all the opportunities that we have with the local talent, with the schools and the universities, and see how we can get those guys involved in business. And also the other thing is, I know that we widened the high street up. Can't remember what it was called. I think it was called Streetscape. This was again before COVID, with the intention of having more market stalls and also having events on the high street, because it would be really cool and nice to have cafes that have tables where we can sit outside instead of, I know everything, I mean, actually we're going that way. It's going to be COVID secure way, right? So hopefully we are looking at cafes that are going to do more of that rather than sitting inside. It's fine, and it's kind of engaging the community locally to want to stay locally, and so much of that has happened as a consequence of COVID anyway. But we mustn't get too lazy and expect things to come to the door. We should feel confident and support our businesses. It's in our hands. We can't just expect everyone else to find the solution. We've got to participate as a community to get some of those results.
Yeah, 100%. You talk about, a community-based involvement to get high streets in Weybridge back up and running amid fierce competition from online retailers. And you talked about the pandemic affecting not just business life, but also community life in Weybridge. Just talking more about that, you said that during the COVID-19 pandemic, you have discovered many green spaces and long walks. If elected to the Elmbridge Borough Council, what precise policies would you like to see introduced that promote a healthy and more active life in Weybridge?
It's almost like I've kind of discovered those trails, and actually, if we look at what the community is saying online, it's like we've all discovered those trails, and those trails have been there for the longest time. I would really like to put Weybridge on the map as a tourist destination, and I know not everybody wants tourists to come, but tourists will bring money, and that's what kind of will keep our village alive, village town, whatever you want to call it. So we don't have any maps on the high street, so you can kind of see which way to go, and what if you go to the river, or if you want to go to the woods, or if you want to go somewhere quiet, if you want to walk up the river and find all the pubs towards Walton Thames. Let's get these into I don't know even know how tourist shops, if they work very well anymore, but we should have better signposts so that we kind of can follow those tracks. And if you're a cyclist, you should know where you're able to go. And the kids, there's so many things for children to do. We've got the Brooklands Museum, the oldest aviation airport. We've got the racetrack. I mean, we do actually have something for everyone, but we just don't promote it enough. And I'd really like to try and get those things done.
Yeah. Staying with local issues now, the Elmbridge Lib Dems are running on a pledge to protect the environment. If you are to get elected, what do you plan to do to protect the environment, especially in the local area?
I think, Felix, one of the other things that we have to remember is that the Lib Dems have been in power for the past, 6 or 7 years. So they've been running Elmbridge Borough themselves. And we do have a national number that we have to meet for planning. And I think it's important to recognize that there's always a balance, right? If we're going to want more money in our village, then I'm saying village is a town, but whatever you want to call it. If you want more money, then you've got to balance between creating more opportunity. More opportunity means more work for our younger community. But we do want to protect our green spaces, our phenomenal green spaces. And there are other ways to build and create affordable housing. But it's just managing those. And I think every case is different. I would keep on top of those issues and work with the community to make sure that whatever we do is the best interest of everyone.
Yeah, and that's obviously fantastic to hear. I want to talk a little bit about a very precise issue now, just for 1 second, because Elmbridge Borough Council have acknowledged that there's been an increase in boats moored without permission along the Thames from Walton to Weybridge, where you're obviously running. And it's something that locals are calling, say, an epidemic of slum boats. Can I ask what the local Conservative strategy is for dealing with that? Because it's something that... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's something that...
It's something that many people have been asking me and people around. People are talking about it. They want to kind of know how we can deal with these, because there has been a big issue with them in our local area, and that's just most of the way down the river now. You can see these really dirty boats.
Cameron, I don't actually know the answer to that, and I'll find out. But it's one of those other things that I'm quite interested in, because we do have a number of, like the sailing club, for example. I was a member of the sailing club when I first moved here, which was about 15 years ago. And it's such a phenomenal location. It's a phenomenal site, but it's underutilized. It's underutilized, and I'm sure the membership has just dived over the last decade. And I would love to bring that back to life and get the young involved, because we're not really using the river as well as we could or should. And if we start using it more, then I believe that boats sitting on the side will kind of become a thing of the past, because we'll be monitoring it better.
I guess the broader point you're making is actually really important, because I focused on something precise there, but when you think about it, it is a very wide-ranging topic. That, you know, the Thames River, it's a beautiful asset to have on your back door, and it's just across the road from my house. I'm very lucky. We get to go over there and utilize it. We've got kayaks. We get to go down there, but what you do see consistently now is larger amounts of pollution in the water. You see dirt and people misusing it, frankly, and it's good to see that people are going to take this more seriously, but also I think encouraging initiatives to help people. Hopefully that will be useful to try and get people outside, as well as you're doing with your campaigns to get people walking again using their excellent green spaces. I think that's fantastic and important.
And also, Cameron, just to add to that, there's two other aspects to consider. When I grew up in that time where we had this massive campaign of can't remember exactly, but it was pick up your litter and keep Britain tidy. It's almost like we've forgotten what that is. And I think we should reintroduce that campaign, because we are spending a lot of time picking up other people's mess, but also the river. It's almost like we're forgetting how to treat nature, because if we don't treat nature in a way that's respectful, then we're not going to enjoy it as much. So I'd like to kind of look at those two campaigns in addition, and remember that everything that we do, we kind of live very close to things that help our mental health. And our mental health is so important, especially through lockdown. And I think one of the best things and the most fortunate things that we've had is access to being able to walk to the river, or being able to walk along the different paths that we have. And if our mental health is to continue to be refreshed and supported, then we've also got to look at making sure that we maximize those spaces by keeping them clean and tidy.
I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball question out here. So, the Magna Carta was signed in Runnymede and Weybridge, and therefore you could call it the home of the rule of law. Do you condemn Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock breaking the law in their handling of PPE contracts, as well as Boris Johnson's illegal prorogation of Parliament?
I think, again, it's one of those things that I'm beginning to learn about being a politician and standing up for rights. I don't agree with everything that the government does. And if I did, then let's see, how do I word that? So as an organizer, as a charity, last year, we have a group of women that were sewing for us. We set this up before COVID, but just as we went into lockdown, we started working with them, and they started sewing reusable masks. They sewed such fantastic reusable masks, but at the time when PPE was right at the bottom and we didn't have enough, we started giving these masks to some doctors. And we were lucky enough to give some to a few hospitals in Luton and I think it was Northampton. The doctors from that hospital, the one that stood outside Downing Street and campaigned to get PPE for staff. So it's kind of torn between, if I'm considering standing by my government, do I also stand up when they don't do things completely as they should? Yes, I have to, because essentially I want to be that person that stands up for the good, and that means being brave enough to say this isn't right.
So you will condemn Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock for breaking the law?
I would condemn anybody that didn't do the right thing. And it's one of those things, right? We have to remember also that this isn't something where we've tried and tested it and we've messed up loads of times. This is something that is very unique and new. And I would think that any government, if it wasn't Boris, if it was somebody else, they would probably make some other mistakes, which would be considered equally as bad.
Sure, but Matt Hancock, for example, did give a PPE to his to a man who worked at a local pub of his, and he's now under investigation. So I don't think it's as simple as just saying, well, it's like a mistake, because surely you would call that like cronyism, and it's a bit more than a mistake.
Yeah, Felix, again, it's under investigation, right? So once the investigation is done, then I could probably say, yeah, that was completely wrong. But at this point, because I don't know all the facts, I would have to say that, yeah, let's look at, it doesn't sound right, but let's look at what the result is.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the other thing to remember as well is it's all about communication and how you say things. I'm always going to be that person that says things in a proactive, friendly manner. And I have to, because if I'm dealing with someone who's really angry, if I'm speaking at the same way that they're speaking, I'm not going to get anywhere. So in order for me to do well in my job in terms of representing both sides, I've got to make sure that I explore the language that I use. And you're doing a fantastic testing of my ability, so this is quite fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on here. It's been great so far, and we're just loving having you right now, right here. Thank you for coming on. Very quickly, moving back to women's issues, only 5 women are CEOs out of the 100 companies on the FTSE 100. That means that 95% of FTSE 100 CEOs are men. As a mentor for the Sherry Blair Foundation, an organization that seeks to change the lives of women in business, what can be done to raise the number of female CEOs and entrepreneurs in the global sphere and in the UK?
I would say, as a woman who's in that space herself, for me, it's always been confidence, right? I believe I can do anything, so I go and try anything, and it's to kind of encourage the next gen to do the same thing. Once you've set your mind to do something, you've just got to make sure you go ahead and do it. And when those obstacles that come in your way, don't let them come in your way. So it's kind of it's almost like the things that I can implement, right? It's helping people to understand what those challenges are and to push through them. That whole conversation around the gender, of course, it's like huge and humongous. And I don't know if you know, but last week, as a charity, we were banned from Twitter for posting an image of a uterus. So we're definitely living in a space where there isn't equality just yet, and looking and exploring at how to keep that conversation moving forward so that we have period products for all women in all toilets. You know, it sounds like a really small task, but it's been a really big one. So it's almost like, yeah, we're pushing for those changes. We've got to just keep pushing for them and bringing them to the fore, because it's only when we bring them to the fore that we recognize that they exist.
Yeah. Would you say that, sorry, Felix, would you say that there's sort of like a stigma around women in business, that they're sort of afraid to go into the business sector? If so, do you think, like you said, how can we remove the stigma and give women the confidence to go into business?
I'm not sure if it's so much a stigma, or if it's kind of looking at what that reason is. Is it the stigma, or is it just, women are responsible for giving birth and raising families, and life gets in the way of career, and it gets in the way at different stages in women's lives. So some women have to choose and opt not to have any family at all. Some will squeeze it in, having a career and family, juggling both. I think those are the other things. We don't have enough childcare, perhaps. Women aren't supported in that work environment. It's looking at all of those things and keep pushing ahead with not just the stigma and confidence, but what are the opportunities?
Yeah.
Will men take time off work and look after the kids and bring the kids up so that their wives can go in and rock their career lives? It's that, isn't it?
No, it's a really thought-provoking answer. So thank you for that. As Rajan mentioned, you are a mentor at the Sherry Blair Foundation. I want to ask your thoughts on Boris Johnson's actions in and around the workplace. In a farewell piece to the Spectator, he advised his successor to, and I quote, just pat her on the bottom and send her on her way, when referring to a female colleague. Is Boris Johnson fit to be Prime Minister of an open and tolerant society, with some of his past remarks?
Again, Felix, wonderful questions. It's kind of, some of the comments, the Me Too movement, let's go to that. The Me Too movement was created because in today's world, conversations that have been had in the past are not acceptable anymore. And in order to keep pushing our agenda as for equality forward, we've got to explore what our behavior patterns are, right? We've got to also explore, like, why do women feel threatened? Why do women put up with sexist comments? All of that has to change in some way for us to keep progressive as society. Boris Johnson was elected as PM by whatever percentage. So is he equipped to be PM? Well, that's already been decided. Should he be a little bit more considerate about the comments and have that decorum around women and kind of think about that messaging? Absolutely. And it's like anything, right? As individual people, we have to be responsible for what comes out of our mouth. And I think we can always work to better ourselves.
Just, you brought up the Me Too movement at the start. Boris Johnson hasn't yet apologised for these remarks. Are you disappointed in him?
What I realise about politics is if you start apologising for things, and this is just as a, my reflection, once you start apologising for things, it's almost like you get bashed. If you don't apologise, you get bashed. If you do apologise, it's almost, how do you behave? You're always going to annoy someone. And I think it's just finding that balance, and people have to make their own decision about what's important to them and how they want to come across with whatever comes out of their mouth and what they represent.
But surely you must think that he should apologise for these remarks, like they're completely unacceptable, especially in today's society. Do you not think, so you don't think he should apologise, or just to get this?
Yeah, if let's say, for example, if I met Boris tomorrow and he whacked me on my bottom, I would tell him there and then, and I would make him apologise to me there and then. Like, to try and get retro apologies, it doesn't seem like it's going to work. It's like trying to get retro planning permission. It doesn't happen and it doesn't work. So, yeah.
Thank you. Wait, Rajan, do you want to go? Anybody? Oh, I'm happy to go again. Anyone? Okay, I'll go again then. So just my final question, just kind of a broad ideological question. The Tories voted against giving children free school meals. Would you say you're disappointed in your colleagues for doing this?
I think sometimes, I mean, I actually don't know. I don't know who voted against it, and I don't know who voted for it, so I couldn't really comment. I believe that we live in a country where all children should have food and nobody should be hungry in our country, so we should look at those policies.
It did include your own MP, though, Ben Spencer, for running me on Weybridge. Are you disappointed in him for voting that down?
Again, I'd have to ask him and have a conversation with him to see what his reasoning behind it is, because sometimes what happens, and I know this is what happens in media, is things are taken out of context and you don't hear the full sentence perhaps, and I think it's valuable to hear both sides of the story before making comments.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, he's also a father of 2 children, so I do not imagine that he did it without thinking about those kind of things.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions, just out of interest?
Yeah. Can we just restart the Zoom meeting first?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sure. We'll go into my last question.
Well, yeah, it's the same link and everything. We just need to restart it.
Okay.
Cool.